Bruce. Here's Mr. Bruce. Introduce Bruce. Like I said, he's going to talk about it. If you look in the back, he's got all his books that he's written. They are for sale.
They are for sale.
And what he's done, he's got 3 books about Gettysburg, and he's combined them. So we're going to hear a little more about Gettysburg.
Thank you so much. And to start my talk, I want to thank you all for what you do. And you do a lot just to keep this nation's history alive. You know, I go around and I give a lot of talks. I do book signings, and just our history that people don't know, especially young people don't know. You know, it's really appalling. But it's groups like this that really does, and so much needed. So I thank you all, and I especially thank you for inviting me here to talk about my books. Anyway, 3 of them, 3 Views of Gettysburg. One, I had a nice dinner with some of you a little bit earlier, and several of you asked, how did I get here? When did I start? How did I get involved in the Civil War? So I thought maybe it might be a good place to start. I know when I started, I was about a little over 13 years old, and my grandmother gave me some original newspaper stories from the Civil War, written by my great-great-great-grandfather. You know, this is how I got involved with the history of writing, and I spent a number of years as a newspaper reporter. But that was really my beginning. I remember my dad taking me and my brother and sister to Gettysburg and some of the other Civil War battlefields. Not unusual for the time. And I took my daughters by doing the same thing and taking them. And I'm now doing it with my grandchildren. But that's where I got started. I spent most of my career, early part of the career as a newspaper reporter. I covered the courthouse. I have some books back here on the true crimes cases I covered. And then I really kind of advanced up. I was a managing editor, and I was managing reporters, which is an awful job. I mean, it was like herding cats. I mean, literally. I wasn't writing that much, and I had the first chance to do my first book. And that was actually a Civil War book on Wert, Delaware. And it was called Unlikely Allies. And as you will see, and as I will tell you, I like stories based on people and things and events, because really what you do and I do make history. And that's always fascinated me, the reasons behind it. When I set Fort Delaware and went down, I said, wow, what an interesting place. Who was here? Why were they here? What did they experience? And as I walked around Fort Delaware, their little gift shop had some reprints of some magazine pieces, but that was about it. So that really got me started to delve into it and do the research. And I hooked up with Dale Fetzer, who actually I had known a few years before that, and he was the historical interpreter. And if you really look close at the Gettysburg movie, you'll see Dale in there at several places. So that was a really, really good way to get started. I live in the area of the Brandywine Battlefield Park. I was the president of the Brandywine Battlefield Park. When I found out there was not a book on the battle, which took place September the 11th, 1777, I said, this is a piece of history that's missing. So that was my next book. It took about 5 years of research. There wasn't much around at the time. I went to London to the British Army Museum and to the Public Records Office, like our National Archives. So I was doing that. And, if you talk with a couple of authors out there, that when you do these books, you really got to do the research. You got to look under that surface if you really want to know what's going on. So I'm doing all this, and I've been to Gettysburg many times. Been to Wheatfield where my one relative was wounded, and I thought I'm never going to write a book on Gettysburg. And one of my publishers asked me, "How about a book on Gettysburg?" I said, "No way. There's 30,000 books written on Gettysburg," and that's what it was at the time. But what happens with me, the books tell me to write them. And one day I was at the angle at the end of Pickett's charge, and I looked across that field. I said, I know the reasons why Lee really had to try it. I knew Longstreet was totally against it. No 13,000 men ever could have taken that field. I knew that. I knew about those Confederates coming out of that tree line. I knew about about 150 artillery pieces. I knew all of it. And then I'm thinking, I just turned to my left a little bit. I looked down the line. I said, who were they? Who helped save the nation that day? Because if they would have pushed off that ridge, we had a very unpopular president in Lincoln. We're a month away from the draft riots. The Copperheads were doing their thing. You had France and England really would like to come in on the southern side so they could keep their commerce going. If this was a major defeat on Union soil, that could have really been a divided nation at that point. And who were these guys that really staved off that attack? I didn't know much about it. I walked down Hancock Avenue and read the monuments, but that's not enough. I looked at all those Pickett charge books, and I read most of them as a kid in the prior years, and they were all written from the Southern perspective. Who was there? What happened? What went wrong? And most importantly, who to blame? And as I was reading it, I was very much noticed the North, and some books didn't get mentioned. Some they got a little bit, some they got a chapter. There wasn't that much on the North. That they were telling me, write the book. I called my publisher and said, changed my mind. These guys deserve a book. And that's how my book, Pickett's Charge, came about. Now, I did a lot of research, of course, in Gettysburg at the National Park, downstairs in the research library. John Hessler was was a librarian at the time, and he told me what I was doing, and he was really great. Every time that I could get there, it was a couple-hour drive from where my house to the library, and I made sure I was there as soon as it opened up, and I stayed till they shut the door. And after I got to know John, he left me there if he was working late. He was really great. And I had, a list, and he could tell what I was doing. I want to see the bachelor papers. I want to see this unit, that unit, that. I just went up and down. And he'd bring them out. And every once in a while, I'd come out and smile. He'd say, you forgot to ask for this one. And he'd give it to me. I knew I was finishing the research there. One day, John came out and said, all right, you've seen everything we have. So I knew I had let dry there that everything that they had there. And as I said, I do my books by people. I tell people stories. People tell me I'm a storyteller. And I think that's how you really engage people. And I wish more teachers and parents would engage their kids by telling them and relating somebody in the family that took part or something that really excites them that can get to students. So when I do my books, I like to find something to start to engage that reader. There's something kind of dramatic, and then I'll come back and tell the whole story. And one day I was finished doing my research, driving back on the turnpike, get to Susquehanna, I can see 3 Mile Island, and I just hit myself in my head. I said I had the beginning of the book about 11 o'clock that morning, and I don't like to waste time. I'm up there taking notes, taking photographs of some of the stuff you're not allowed to photograph, really kind of engaged. And what really came back to my mind was the letter that General Wert wrote back to his wife the day after the battle. Wert was in charge of the Philadelphia Regiment. His Landers was awarded a Congressional Medal of Honor for what he did on July the 3rd of 1863. He was from a proud family, West Point graduate, My grandfather was in the American Revolution, all this, and he was put in charge of those body of men because they wanted to have a little bit more discipline. We wanted a little bit more discipline with that regiment. Good fighters, little lax on their marching, little lax leaving and coming back. And Webb was the guy to really instill that. So he is the one in charge. And they had the angle. The 69th PA was part of that. And they pushed for the tops of trees. You had the 71st at the angle. You had the 72nd that started out at Hancock Avenue. Where the 106th was there, and the other part was at Cold Still. You had all them. And the point I'm talking about, he wrote about the letter, was when Armistead's men and Armistead reached the line where it's a stone wall. And when Webb looked back to his wife that day was, I just wanted to die. I wanted somebody to shoot because he thought he had lost at that point the whole nation before everything. And I said, what a thing to write back to your wife. But it was really sincere. It wasn't kidding. But it also showed, what everybody's service meant to the country and to them. They were in it. And they wanted to do best for the country and save the country. I just thought that Webb's letter back just indeed, kind of showed what was going on. And that's how I start the book, and then I back up and talk about Webb, and Webb being appointed to the head of the regiment at the same time that he got command of the army. Soldiers didn't really know him that well. He was pretty much disciplinarian. His officers didn't like him right away because they all had taken their insignias off their uniforms, which at first seemed like a good idea. You didn't want the sharpshooters to shoot the officers. And Webb reminded them, they might not know who you are, but also your men won't be either when you give the order to throw back on. And he tried to show that he was one of the guys. During the march to Gettysburg, they were coming to a river, and usually the men stopped and took their boots and socks off, waited across, threw back on. But that was wasting too much time for Webb. So he said, into the water. And he was the prime example. He went to the middle of that and stood there in the water while men came across. And of course, somebody noticed and said, yeah, he's got on his bike. He's not getting it. So it didn't quite work out the way he did. First day, he gets to the end of the first day, they get to right outside the little round top. And of course, this is the Pennsylvania regiment. Untold Reynolds 7 didn't start them off too well. Second day, they get positioned at the hook there at the cops and trains. Has everybody seen the old battle? Gettysburg man, the lights up with lights.
Electric man.
Electric man. Yeah, I can still hear in my mind that announcer talking about the fish hook and the defense and stuff, and it's just there. It's great. I mean, they had part of them. They get there. They're there the second day. Early on, they weren't engaged too much. Later in the day, they certainly were with the Georgia regiment that came up, and the fighting back and forth. And the 71st trying to chase the Georgians back to the line after they were beaten off. And Webb said they were stopped. You saw what happened to Sickles down here. They put a breach in the line, and the Confederates almost came and reached it. No, you're not going to do it. And poor Sickles, although he lost his leg that day, he didn't really lose his leg, right? They took it back to Washington, and he viewed it later on. So they had that experience. The captain of the 71st got his men to pick up the rifles in front, so when that charge took place the next day, they had extra rifles when it took part. So I go through that, and I go through the third day, you know, wake up in the morning, not much is going on. The cold still didn't work. Just sorted and stopped by Custer and the rest of the gallery, and they're waiting on that Pickett store to come. And when I read some of the letters and some of the other information, actually I got a lot of research from a court case. There's a court case that the 72nd brought over the placement of mine. And originally they were supposed to be back on Gamecock Avenue and not at the wall. And they thought they were being dishonored, it should have been at the wall. So this court case had a lot of testimony about where I was and where everybody else were did. So that's really the kind of research for the book. So we were talking about almost going to sleep, like what was going on back in Philadelphia. And then that first cannon shot that took off, then all the others that came. And you know, this is always missing from the other books. What did they see? What did they feel? You know, they could retreat. They had their deadline there. And it wasn't a newspaper deadline, it was a real deadline. You don't cross it. And they said, you know, it just opened up. It was like hell on earth. You know, they lost men there, and not as much. You know, they came out pretty good. The southern shells for so long, as we know, but definitely in the war. And then they saw the Confederates coming out of that line, going to that march across, and the cannon fire, and the you know, dispute between Hunt and Hancock on whether to keep firing the cannons or stop and reload. But one on long after the war, which happened. But the men there at the Philadelphia Regiment, they didn't have anywhere to go. They did. They lost stuff. We know they were killers. He was finally given a medal or awarded a medal of honor during President Obama, I think it was. And you know, lost in that first cannon, and several of his pieces of his guns. And right before the charge, there was a gap there in the line, and that was from 72nd up. And Cushman said, I can hold this. Let me hold this. Well, that's where our mistake came through. And Cushman was killed during the battle. But this, you know, this is the story that wasn't really told beforehand, and I really thought they deserved the book. I usually give an hour talk on all three of these, so you're getting a kind of shorthand on all three of them. The publisher that I use a lot is Farragut Books out of New York, and the publisher, I had a good history with them, and they hadn't really done a Civil War book before. But the publisher, you know, really pleased with doing this. And if you take a look at the cover, you know, if you have an idea what the cover should be, and most Civil War books at that time was an old painting or drawing of troops. And she showed me this bright blue cover with the two flags. I'm thinking, what is she thinking? But she was right, because she went into bookstores and she put this against the other books. This one stands out. It was a great marketing ploy. Really, you know, it stands out. And also, there was, you know, everybody's got a conspiracy theory. If you take a look at the cover of the two flags, the Confederate flag is on top of the American flag, and we're really Southern sympathizer. No, when I saw the draft of the original cover, the American flag was up front, and they had the wrong American flag. They had so many stars. It was that close to production. I said, the flag to do that. You know, we're getting hammered out there. So there's always something like that. The illustration for that book came out of the J. Howard Wert collection. You might know Craig Cobb. Yeah. Well, I had no idea who Craig Cobb was. And this is, you know, something that happens all the time. There's always stories behind everything. I was in a flower shop in Coatesville. And a friend of mine ran it was a family business, and I was telling about coming to Christmas gets charged. And he said, "Do you know my wife's cousin?" I said, "Who's your wife's cousin?" That was Craig Powell. And that came. So Craig accepted me as part of the family since I knew his family. Yeah, yeah. And he's very protective of the whole collection. It's had piece of soul, and I understand why he is. But he invited me up, and he brought out some stuff from the collection of Pickett's charge. I don't know about you, but if you can get that close to history, and at this point, he put the stars off of Armistead's uniform in my hand. The hair went up the back of my body. And, it was so good. There were the other pieces out of there. And he had a photographer take images, and that was a lot of the illustrations that were used to pick a story. So now I have one of Gettysburg. He came up to me, he loved to pick a story, and he said, "This whole collection in the Wert family really needs their vote too." And if you don't know anything about the Wert collection, there are some amazing items in there. The podium that Lincoln used in the Gettysburg Address, that's in there. I got to stand on Pennsylvania Cable Network and do 7 years ago, at least a little bit about it, as they did a TV show on the book in their collection. One of the things that I really wanted to see in that collection was General Barlow's saddle. Barlow was my relatives, being officer early in the war. I thought, they got to at least see the saddle. I can see it. I touched it. I wonder if they touched it. It's just to be that close. All of these, there's thousands of pieces in this collection. And we took Shipper Publishing out of Akron, Pennsylvania, did it. And Shipper is doing catalogs, reproductions.
High quality. Yeah.
High quality. And take a look at that book. It is. I mean, there's things that are really haven't been seen. And it comes from most of the parts in the South because after the war became known as the collector that we cherish that stuff, and a lot of the soldiers were looking for somebody that would keep everything together. So that's how the collection grew and grew and grew. And it wasn't only just the battles and everything. His father and Wert also knew Thaddeus Stevens. Stevens was on the council in Gettysburg with Wert's father. They were, of course, great abolitionists together. Wert, as a child, told stories of how the escaped slaves escaped the slave catchers in Gettysburg and all the oil that was going on in the town. Since, of course, it was pretty close to the Mason-Dixon line. And there was a lot of businesses in town that made money from the selling and businesses. So you had a lot of back and forth. So he did that. He tells a story, deals with Pope's Hill when he was in college, and he was at Pennsylvania College now, of course, Gettysburg College, and they had a fraternity house downtown. And like all fraternity guys, they were causing a little bit of trouble, and they weren't really liked in the neighborhood people. And one day, Wert was there with some of his colleagues, and an escaped slave was brought into the house by one of the members. And he said they were so close to catching him, I just couldn't let him out there. So the members actually took him out to Close Hill, and Craig showed me the place. If you come off the tower, and you come to the northeast corner down a little bit, there's two large boulders, and they're pretty close. And that's where they put them that night.
I was on the line that Green had.
Yeah.
Before it was rock rolling down below that the Confederates had.
Yeah, and we're at a hide and everything.
Wow.
So, doing the research and just his story alone, Stevens, right before the Battle of Gettysburg, suggested to young Wert, said, you got to command a regiment of colored troops. And her recommendation for him to go to Washington to get permission, he did. He had the notice, and that's when, Lee was really invading and getting close to his homeland. He stuck that approval in his head, rode back to Gettysburg, made it there a couple days before Lee, returned to the militia officer and said, basically it was a spy. They dressed him up, put him on a wagon. The horse had one eye, and sent him off against the intelligence and from the rebel army. And he did find him, and was getting up towards Harrisburg. And one of the rebels was a former classmate of Wert and said, "It's an abolitionist." And they took him into custody. Now, what would happen if they looked under that hat and got that, north of the end of J. Howard there?
The next.
Yes, he would have. And that was all happening at the time of Lee called everybody back to Gettysburg. Word got away, made it back in the morning of the first day of battle, and really spent 3 days, moving troops around Gettysburg so well for me. After that, he joined a Pennsylvania company. He was a teacher. He taught in the Adams County schools, Harrisburg for a long time. He was a member of the JR. He wrote a lot of the history of Gettysburg, the unions. He wrote columns. I really got into his life. I tell you, I had access to just about all of his writings, putting together, and what he did, and being friends of Stevens and everybody. One of the places uptown is the Philly Pierce House. What the young girl saw in the Battle of Gettysburg, they're apparently to get state to go out at Gettysburg for a little mountain. Not really safe, but still look at this book. Actually, Jay Howard put forward to that. He knew until he spears. It's not signed in the stadium. Who did that? So you have all this rich history coming together. Craig, if you don't know Craig, he's a character. Actually, it's coming Saturday if you want to see him in his regular spirit. He's bringing some medical equipment from the war out of that collection. We're having a Lafayette Day in Chester County. And Craig's going to have nothing. But I was at one of the photography sessions, and I was given a talk on American Revolution, someplace in, I think, for the people at the Battle of Paoli. And there was a spurs that we looked at Valley Forge and Gettysburg for this collection. Craig had it there, we had to do photographed. And Craig came up, like I said, Craig really protective. He came up to me and said, "Would you like to take the spurs to show the audience?" I said, "That's it. You never leave it out of your hands." So he said, "I was just talking with Jay Howard." He said it was okay. I think he thought he was talking with Word, making it okay. You're kind of hit in the presentation. I brought up here to get a chance. There's a map of the hospitals of Gettysburg, and it's from an 1872 Adams County publication. All the information on the back. There's really needs in the Word collection. And Craig liked the book so much, he made a gift of this book to me. So I thought I'd bring that and share it to you. But again, that book has so much, and it's so clear to look at all the artifacts, and it's north and south, and it's just amazing. So here I am. I now have 2 books. And, where am I going to get another one? Well, like I said, I looked at the one. And I'm Chester County, down near Chatsford. There's a famous artist there that has basically its own museum. And there's an artist that taught under him, Andrew White is the artist's name. His paintings go for millions and millions of dollars. You might remember the Helga collection with all the nudes that he didn't tell his wife he was doing. And he sold for, I think it was $80 or $90 to somebody in Japan years ago. And one of his neighbors was Carl Kerner. Carl's granddad, you see some of the white paintings, there's a German soldier from World War I, that's Carl's grandfather. And Carl's been depicted as mom and dad also. Carl's the only artist personally taught by Wyatt and Wyatt's sister Carol. And you can see the influence of the Wyatts and Carl's paintings. And I've known Carl for a fairly long time. And we were once just came up to walk around Gettysburg. And the next time he said, let's go to Gettysburg again. And he wanted me to show him places that are important to me. And what he didn't really articulate, or what he wanted was this idea. He wanted to do original painting. It had to be original. Different scenes of Gettysburg, not the monuments, not the reenactors. There is one reenactor in the part of one monument, actually the 44th New York one Round Top. Everything else is kind of scenes today. And he picked up for an emotional reason. And my job was to interview Carl, tell him why I was emotional. I could put my own thoughts of it, and I did the background, the history of it. We've had people read the book, and it's emotional Gettysburg, and say they don't look at Gettysburg the same way now after reading this. Because what did they die for? What was the outcome? What do we have today? Why do we remember? That is not your typical battle Gettysburg book, but we're so happy we did it. It's going through, I think at the end of the two printings, Regent Publishing out in California as a publisher. It just so happened the publisher is from Chester, Kentucky. And it's amazing. Again, how things just kind of work out. And before I finish that, Carl and I were looking for another project, like about 2 years, probably 3 years. Time flies after a while, you can't keep the years straight. But Carl and I, after we finished, we're looking at each other, we got to do another book. And Carl lives on the Brandywine battlefield. And I'm the formal president down there. We would spend a lot of time there. And we just looked at each other, and what are we talking about? We need to do an emotional Brandywine. And the same premise. Copies there. That's latest book came out late last year, and actually the first edition sold out in 3 weeks. It was made. Carl's paintings are just gorgeous. So instead of 1, 2, now I have 3 books. I wasn't going to have many. They're like 3 views. I think they're pretty different. Now I got into it. You had the biggest charge for the victors really needed their due. This priceless collection of artifacts and how they're preserved. By the way, I Craig would love to find an organization or museum that will take this collection. The problem he's having is that under law, the way it's written for the whole collection, they all must stay together. So you get museums like this piece and that piece, but it's all got to stay together. He's still looking for something. So I had that collection. And then just kind of that think piece with Carl and the emotion, it was just great. The first time we went out there to the battlefield, it was spring day. And usually I go up and I have a signing or something, and you're always busy and you don't really have time to do a little sightseeing. And so we stopped at 2 or 3 different places, and I remember one of them was at the end of Pickett's charge, we're leaving out to greet the troops as the retreat, and I met Pickett, and Pickett said, I had no division out there in the field. Yeah. And, we went a couple of places, we were coming back, we were talking about our experiences that day. And Carl said, that was the most impactful one that day. And I said, yeah, I was too. We had different reasons, and I talk about it in the book. Carl said he could really feel the anger of the survivors, useless charge, and loss of brothers, members of their family. And I said, For some reason, I didn't get that feeling. Lee was more in my mind. I said that had been one of the worst days of the whole Civil War for Lee. Here his men had always come through. He put them out there and was sure they could do it. And you saw all the casualties out there. So that was, again, just those two looks that went in, and that's what we want from the book, that you have to agree with Carl's emotion or my emotion, but just kind of that deeper look into it. So I now have three. Do I need a fourth? Probably. Right? I mentioned this to a couple of people before at dinner. Again, books are always telling me to do it. And anyway, I get really nervous if I'm not writing one. I've been doing this for so long for the project. I was recently, I read the Eric Larson book, latest one to come out, and he wrote about the months leading up to the firing of Fort Sumter. I like Larson. He did Devil in the White City. He's done stuff on a lot of other American history. I thought he did a pretty good job of researching and getting perspectives of different people in Washington, Charleston, and some of the other rebels down there in the South, and putting it all together. I knew the basic story, but I really thought there's some things I didn't know. There's always things I don't. That's what makes us fun, because we're always learning. And as I was reading, it had a little bit about Abner Doubleday. Doubleday, some people said the hero of Fort Sumter. He supposedly sighted the first cannon that fired in response after Sumter was shot upon. And I kind of knew that he was talking about his abolitionist views and how much he was all through his life. And they talk about being in the Mexican War and everything. But what it really taught me was that when the Star of the West, that unmanned Union ship bringing in supplies, couldn't make it in the harbor because the Southern batteries fired at it. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, why didn't Anderson and Doubleday return the fire? And that's pretty intriguing because Doubleday wanted to. And this was at the point where South Carolina was pretty much out there by itself. The other southern states hadn't really seceded at that point. There were batteries along the shore, which the Union had just gotten consolidated at Fort Sumter. They were manned by professionals, and they were a little bit weak. What would have happened if what Doubleday wanted to do, they bombed the heck out of that one or two batteries up there? Couldn't have stopped the Civil War, but maybe it could have shortened it, or it might have given pause to Virginia and some of the others that didn't really join the South till later to rethink this and say, wait a minute, we're not going to give up without a fight. Because until the firing really started, the North was, we were so passive. Our one Pennsylvania President Buchanan just putting it out there as quickly as he can. Floyd, the Secretary of War, was pretty good at war, and every Southern Union that it had, he was going to go to the South, and then all the armies would be down there for him. So he basically had a traitor up there in the administration. Anderson, and Doubleday had a lot of good words about Anderson. He was a Southerner. And he, did his duty. He didn't have any orders to fire back with the Star of the West. And, he was asking for orders, and none came down. There's really no defense of what was happening to the U.S. property down there in Charleston. It really got me to think, what would have happened if indeed he did? I hate the what ifs and this would happen, but I think that's a good point to ponder. Were we not aggressive enough in defending our honor, our stores, and our land early on, and look what it left to? If you fast forward to Gettysburg, and we know about General Reynolds being killed on that first day, Doubleday taking over the first war, And by all accounts, except for one by Howard, they did magnificent. They cut off the rebels, which had more troops there on the field, and they kind of cited Cemetery Hill being a great defensive, and they saved most of the rest of the war, even though they suffered a lot of casualties back on the hill. Howard apparently saw some members of the First Corps retreating early, wasn't a vast number, and certainly the vast majority of the First Corps stayed in fall valiantly. But Howard told me the First Corps ran. So all of a sudden, Meade thinks that whole First Corps just ran in front of the rebels, which was not the case. I think there was a lot of other politics. I think Meade and Doubleday had issued way back in Fredericksburg. Meade was, when he makes up his mind, supposedly didn't really change it that much. So you had all that going on. And when it came time to name Reynolds' replacement as Corps commander, it should have been Doubleday if you listen or take a look at seniority, which usually happens. But Meade did not give it to him. And I think, that's important, but what's more important is after Pickett's charge, you had the Confederates retreating. What did Peacock want to do? He wanted immediately to follow up with the Pickett. Later on, Lincoln, I think Lincoln loved like on me, go get him. Why didn't you do it sooner? And if Doubleday was in the Corps commander, he would have added his voice to that. He'd say, I have no idea why Meade didn't do it. So, if he was there, maybe his words might have, swayed Meade, probably not, but at least they would have been there to do it. So, you had him again, where he had the right idea about the place really to act upon it. This morning, as I was doing more research on Doubleday, and I've read his biography, which is about 20 years old, and I've read the books he wrote. He wrote one about Fort Sumter, and he wrote one about Gettysburg. And I have an old book that I got at a book sale at a historical society, written in, I think it was 1880 something, called The Annals of War. And it's got essays in there. And one's by Longstreet. And his essays were on the 10 mistakes the South made at Gettysburg. But at the end of the biggest charge, and he thought that was the biggest one. He said it would have been lots worse if you followed up right. So I'm thinking about Doubleday, unheeded, both at Fort Sumter and at Gettysburg. And like if his thoughts or his recommendation put in action, the Civil War might have been a lot less in time and loss of people. So that's my thought process. Who knows when we get time, but I can feel that nagging in the back. That's how I do the books. The books, again, tell me to write it, and I really love getting into the personality yet again. I got a lot of research to do, but that's where I am now. So it's not 3 views of Gettysburg, it's 3.5 views of Gettysburg. Time for questions or yeah.
And nagging drives you crazy, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. You just can't get away from it.
Just think on the 3rd day you meet with 6.
Oh, yeah, we had a whole floor unused sitting area. We had it there. It was, yeah. Oh, it was. It was. And it cost, over a year more of fighting.
Yeah, you and I talked a little bit. I think you're on a good thread with that.
Yeah.
You can have some fun with that one.
I'm certain to. It's real. And again, it's this is what happened with the Lafayette book. It just got. Yeah.
Can you safely say or not say that the 69 Pennsylvania stopped British charge?
69 was responsible for stopping it at the concentration because we don't know that's where they were going. Lots of help. You had the 71st up there getting hammered. I remind you, I want to tell you the story about the 72nd, 50th anniversary. And you had different troops on each side Yes, New York and Delaware and stuff that rushed up when they saw that we or warned or Wet was having trouble. They all it was a team effort, but the 69 cricketer tribe that did a really great. 150 anniversary. I'm gonna get further on signing, but you know what this started. I sold one to a woman on the two stories on the second, and it's obvious my angle when I'm writing about it. The next day after the reenactment of Texas Church, she saw me and started running after me, and her husband was trying to keep her back. Said, you're the one who sold me this. He got wet last night and I didn't care. And she obviously didn't look to know what I was writing about. Yeah.
Actually, I have four questions.
Sure.
And I'll ask them and then you can answer.
Sure.
You know Carol Reardon?
I know Carol Reardon. I was signed to her. I ran my Lafayette law supplier before you finished the third.
She teaches up at Penn State.
Yeah.
I'm an engineering professor. So I talked to her and set the class. Couple questions I've asked her and she hasn't had a good answer. As Pickett's guy's got about halfway across the field.
Right.
If Anderson's troops would have backed him up like they were supposed to, you think that would have turned the tide? I'll keep asking. Number two, if you walk that across Pickett's field, you think that fence also turned the tide? Third thing is, a lot of people said he should have followed up immediately with Sigurd's 6-4, but when the attack was over, it was late afternoon. If you got 6-4 all ready to go, it would have been dark. Then the next day it poured down rain, so they couldn't attack that. That's my last. And my final question is, do you know about where Dick Barnett fell? Because they never did find the spot.
Right. I could guess that everybody else had at what part of the field came down with this man, and generally, I don't know.
What's your thoughts on Anderson?
And well, the whole thing started, everybody said, oh, Lee must have been trained at doing it. That was the Lee's original plan. I actually did a tour with one of the first guys on Pickett Short, and usually a frontal attack, you have to have more men than your enemy, because if you do that, you have to have your flanks covered, and you got to have air covered. And they were talking about Eisenhower and D-Day and what he did and how he did it. And that's the way it's fought at West Point. And I kind of thought that's what Lee wanted to happen, along with the attacks by Judge Stewart and Hope Still. But it didn't happen. They couldn't find where the artillery was. The men didn't come back in. So it was not executed. I also thought Lee, but it was sort of the way it is, that his orders weren't that exact. That hill was practical. Coastal should have been that hill. And everybody said if someone was there, the orders wouldn't have been needed, and that would have made a lot different. So yeah, I think if it was executed the way that Lee wanted to do it, yes. On that the Emmitsburg road with the rail, the fence. If they were going to do it, why didn't they make sure one of those artillery pieces bombed the heck out of it and opened it up so they wouldn't have to stop and climb over? And when they stopped there, they were actually in the musket range of the 71st Pennsylvania. That's when they opened up with those extra muskets.
They knew the fence was there because the right storage was there, yes.
Yeah, they knew it was there. Yeah, you're right, because that's where kind of they attacked late in the afternoon. It wasn't, and you can see it. I mean, it's less than a mile. I actually walked Pickett Church about 2 weeks ago with Carl Kerner and did the paintings. We were back at Gettysburg. We were doing a book signing, and we went out and just walked it again.
I walked through a week ago and ended up with 4 ticks.
I tell you, you get like something. My second 150th Pickett Church story. The 150th anniversary, I was up there, and if you remember, there was a lot of big storms the week or so before that. There was one monument that actually had this knocked over the top of it, and it was the 72nd Pennsylvania. I can't tell you, a number of people said, see, they should have been back on Hancock's Avenue. Somebody up there was telling them, you know, you're in the wrong place. It's amazing. For the 150th, they put it back up, they wired it up. And then I went back like a week or so later, and it was just the pedestal to it got it fixed. Gettysburg's an interesting place. I go up all the time, and people say, you know, why? And I said, just because it's different. It's different every time.
Any other questions?
Anything? Yeah.
Related to General Pickett, you familiar with the Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond?
I know about it, and I think I was there years and years.
All I wanted to say was, I was down there maybe a dozen years ago.
Yeah.
His cousin took me down, and what was interesting was, most important people like Jeff Davis were in the middle of the cemetery. Okay, and then the people with the least, whatever, were on the outside, and the force of Pickett right on the outside wall.
Well, you know, you didn't forgive Pickett for losing it, and, you know, Lee was invincible. You know, Longstreet got in trouble because he was in the Grant administration. There's a lot to that, that kind of goes back and forth.
But at the end of the war, they could add to Canada.
Yeah.
Got a question on.
Yes, sir.
Why was meeting able to predict that we would take in the Senate instead of the funds?
Well, yeah, that evening before, it's kind of interesting that meeting of the generals there at the Oyster home. What I heard was that, you know, Lee has tried the left and right there. I think he's got left to do is the center, and they kind of reinforced it. You know, Longstreet thought, yeah, that's what they were going to do. You know, why do you attack the middle? Was it a good call? And some of it was like the first war with Doubleday. I mean, that's where they were put off to the left of the Philadelphia Brigade that were there. And Chamberlain's group was also a little bit further down the line. I think he was also using it as a place to put troops that were seriously engaged the first 2 days too. So might have been, you know, kind of planning, you know, maybe that's where they're going to do it, and maybe part of it's also the luck of having it all there. I've never read anything that specifically said, oh, I'm sure Lee's going to condemn the middle. Sure. Sure.
Why was the 71st Pennsylvania and the 59th New York which won, and not the 69th final hand to hand?
You know, the 69th was hand to hand. I think some of the 71st, and some of them pushed back when the hand one came up. And that's when Hall and some of the others saw what was happening and rushed their men to it. Webb also, you know, he wanted the 72nd to go to the wall, and Webb was one of them that opposed having the monument there after the war because they would not immediately go under his orders. And Webb actually was fighting with one of the color guards and had hand to hand with the color guards that Webb wanted to take it up when the kid was shot and killed and gone up. So, you know, we were talking 10 minutes of action probably, because the whole charge was started and done in an hour. So it wasn't, you know, there was a lot of things going on up there.
Even though they had a stone wall for protection, right? They had immense casualties, right?
They had the stone wall up there, and they really, it wasn't very big.
Real tall.
Yeah, and they
Was that short?
oh yeah, it wasn't very much, and they reinforced it a little bit.
It's misleading.
Yeah, it's not like, you know, a big wall they're coming over.
Well, up to your ears.
Yeah, it probably wasn't really even that much, but it was, if you get down behind it and you can shoot over it and it gave you enough, and it really shortened the target for the union.
Any other questions?
Anything?
Okay.
We got one.
The court case,
Yeah,
what, was it in Adams County before, or was it in federal?
it started in Adams, they sent it to federal, the federal kicked it back to Adams, if I remember correctly. The 72nd, thought that they were dishonored, and after all the appeals and everything, I'm sure it was the state court or, the county court said, you're okay. It was something. Yeah, I thought it was, it was the state Commonwealth court said, you can be up
Because they were
there.
in charge of all the monuments and stuff.
Yeah.
at that time. And that Gelder was the guy that they were relying on
Right.
for technical stuff.
Yeah, and they were supposed to be placed at where they did the best fighting during the battle.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Want to give you
Oh,
a certificate. Thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
time. And just like, next month, is Scott Mead is going to be talking about flames across Gettysburg, which is going to be leading on, he does have the book, it's going to be leading on to our tour in October. So